Good afternoon, friends, colleagues. It gives me great pleasure to be here, not only to host you in our premises, which has been really put to very good use, but to join the Career Day as a speaker myself. I started this Career Day with the FSDC really 5 years ago, and we have been having it in various locations, mostly at the Convention Center at HSBC. Last year we were here, and I promised that I will let the FSDC use the space from here on. I think it will be put to very good use. and normally we charge for the use of this space. Any event, I was given the title, My Story, Career Path and Key Lessons to Learn, really by the organizer. I have nothing to do with designing the talk on the title. But in any event, I thought that, Lawrence, I have no paper, I have no iPad. I'm just going to share with you my experience. To start with, there is no plan per se in a career plan on my part. I graduated from university, and then I got married fairly young and had children right away. Not necessarily planned, but that's how things happen. And then I decided that I did want to go to graduate school. So I went back to law school after when my children were 3 and 6. In the United States, law school, it's a graduate degree. So I had my undergraduate, I stayed home for 6 years, had the children, and then I went back to law school. And when I finished, I started working. My children were already 9 and 12 at that time, or no, 6 and 9 at the time. And when I look back, it turned out to be a very good move on my part, not necessarily by planning, but because when my children were young, I was home. And when I started my career in the early days, I wasn't really gung-ho of being on the fast track in the law firm. I was just very grateful that I had the opportunity to go back to school after having a family. I was very grateful when I graduated from law school. I got a really good position with a blue chip law firm in San Francisco. I was always grateful for the opportunities that had come my way. And so I started as a junior associate like everybody else, finishing law school. And I did a lot of the corporate work. And the major client at that time was Chevron, the oil company, which was an old client, a standing client of the firm. And then 2 years later, or 3 years later, in 1985, my husband's family wanted him to come back to Hong Kong. And I reluctantly returned to Hong Kong in those days because I felt that I did not want to give up a really hard-earned job in a good law firm in San Francisco. But that happened, and then so I came back to Hong Kong, and I worked for a New York-based firm in Hong Kong, and that was in the 80s, late 80s, and that was the wave of the foreign Chinese joint venture. Those days, China was opening up. A lot of multinationals want to invest in China, and one way or the other, I became the lawyer who specialized in a lot of consumer brands. So Coca-Cola was my client. McDonald's was my client, Johnson & Johnson was my client. I did a lot of consumer goods in those days and helped them set up ventures in China. And with them, I went to a lot of places and really participated in the early days of the opening up of the Chinese economy and saw a lot. And I would say in the late 80s, when I started going to some remote, some not so remote places like Shanghai, where Coca-Cola had its first wholly owned venture, I could have never have imagined some years later that China's economy become the second largest in the world, that China has come up in many ways We have professionals of our caliber, foreign trained, foreign worked, and really have a different kind of competition in that area. And so, I was quite happy doing that, and come to a stage where the clients asked for me in the firm because I was familiar with most of the big name consumer brands. And then one day I got a call. I was on holiday. I got a call from a friend who was a recruiter. And then he urged me, he said, the Securities and Futures Commission is looking for a local person. I said, what do you mean local person? Well, the SFC was set up after the 87 crash, and it was set up in 89, and I was approached in mid-1990s. And I wasn't quite sure I want to leave the practice where I was being considered. I was on the partnership that year, was going to be made partner that year. And as you know, if you're a lawyer, becoming a partner is really a very major step. I did not want to give that up. But I was urged to at least talk to the people at the SFC. So one day I went for interview. I saw the chairman, the vice chairman, the 3 executive directors, and I got an offer. And I turned them down because I wasn't sure. I did not want to give up my partnership track, which was really right there. Within a few months, I was going to be made partners. So I said no. And then they came back. To make a long story short, they came back and gave me a different kind of offer. So I couldn't turn to my partner in the law firm. They would have killed me if I said, I'm leaving the firm now, right? So who did I turn to? I turned to my first boss in San Francisco, the partner that I worked for in San Francisco. And my first lesson learned, which I have been sharing with a lot of young people, and I want to share with you today, is what that partner told me then. He said, Laura, you should go out, spread your wings and see the world. This is so true because when you are in a job, in a career, all you see is what is in front of you. And there's nothing wrong in that. In fact, you should see what is in front of you and do what is in front of you and do a good job. With that, I think opportunity will come because you will make yourself known that you're good in certain area of work, in certain specialty that people would want you to, when they think of a new position, they will think of you. And that's exactly what happened in my case. And of course, with the encouragement of my very first boss, I decided to take the plunge and join the SFC. And Mark Dickens, who's my colleague since those days, he joined actually after me. He was a few months after me. And when I joined, I was, I think, in the top 20 people, 12 to 15 people, I was the only Chinese, I was the only woman. And it was, no, there was another Chinese, Michael Wu was the other Chinese. So it was a very different environment. And I joined the SFC, and it wasn't an easy time. And what I had in mind then was to join the SFC on a 30-month contract like everybody else, and then I would go back to my law practice. The firm has already said you can come back anytime, and then I know that there are other firms who have expressed an interest in me, so I felt, okay, this is an adventure. I would go out and see the world, so to speak, and join the SFC, and it was not easy work, I have to say. It was very different work than from my law firm. It was not as collegiate as what my law firm in my firm in Hong Kong and in San Francisco. But the work is so challenging, so interesting, that after my first contract, I decided to stay on. And it was not planned. I mean, I just thought this is really very satisfying for me to see that I could take part and be the agent of change, things that are not right. We make policy at the SFC, we reform the stock exchange. Of course, I had no idea then that the exchange that I reformed and end up demutualizing before I left the SFC and now becoming chairman. So the world has come a big circle. Anyway, so my career was not, as I say, was not exactly planned. I did not start it out saying that when I go to law school, I want to do this, and then we'll end up becoming chairman of the exchange. No, it did not happen that way. It's just happened one thing at a time. And I think that's one of the lessons I want to share with you, is that whatever you do a good job. You have to be committed, you have to be dedicated, and not just, doing a job. It's more than that. You have to put yourself in that, and that shows. Because later on, when you become a boss, become a supervisor, you can tell who in your team are the one who's putting the heart in it, who are really dedicating himself or herself to the job. And those are the people who will shine in their job, who will do a good job, and will make people realize, notice them and realize that this is someone you want to consider in the future. So whatever you do today is a preparation for your next step, which you may not necessarily know what the next step is. So what you are doing today is preparing yourself for the next job, and then the next job, and then when opportunity comes, and then you go along that way. So for me, I stayed at the SFC for 10 years. Really not on my original plan. I thought that after a few years I would go back to practice. I didn't. And then after 10 years, I would say it was a very gratifying and challenging 10 years. I decided to take a break. I thought being in the sort of a public eye when decisions are made and always subject to scrutiny, it's quite stressing. And I would want to maybe take a break and go back to the private sector. Maybe as a lawyer, maybe as something else I really didn't have in mind. But within 2 weeks of my announcing to the government that I would not renew my contract with the government, because we have to give a 6-month notice, I got a call from a friend in Beijing. And I was told that the premier then, Zhu Rongji, wanted me to join the CSRC, the Chinese regulator, as an officer. And I didn't quite get it the first time. I thought, because the chairman, Anthony Neal, before me, had joined as an advisor. And I thought it would be the same role. And my friend said, no, you didn't hear me enough. You need to move to Beijing, and you need to be the officer, be a vice chairman of the CSRC. I said, what does that entail? Nothing like that had happened before. So the only condition was that you have to give up your foreign passport, which is right, because if you work for any government anywhere in the world, whether it's US, UK, or anywhere, you cannot be a foreign citizen. So that was the only thing I said, okay. So of course I discussed with my husband, and he was extremely supportive. And so within a very short time, I told them, yes, I will. And I didn't think about compensation. I didn't think about anything. I just thought this is an opportunity of a lifetime. Of course, I will, with the support of my husband, I will go to work in Beijing. And I didn't think too much about it. I just thought the opportunity is so precious that I want to grab it. But then I said to my friend that I need some time to expatriate. I was both a US and a UK citizen, so I have to spend 6 months getting that process through. I gave up my passport. I joined the CSRC in March of 2001. And from the time that I realized, I was given when I got the phone call, which was July of 2000, to the time that I take up the post was about 9 months. I took 6 months to expatriate from both countries. And during that time, then, we talk about compensation and so on. And I was told that the State Council will pay me the same amount as they pay me in Hong Kong as the SFC, which was unusual. And I really debated, should I take it or should I not take it? There are ramifications either way. If I don't take any pay, that means whoever follow me will not be able to, I will set a precedent. And I think, my professional services is worth something. And also I think it's important for the Chinese government to know that if they want to employ Hong Kong professional, first of all, they prepare to pay the market rate, and I should accept that. So I told them, yes, I will take the whole package as I was being paid in the SFC. some friends have said, well, maybe you should take a discount. And I said, what kind of discount? 10%, 20%, 30%? I mean, even if I take 50%, it's still much more than my colleagues. So to make a long story short, I decided to take the whole package, and then I will receive from the package what all the other vice ministers get, which was 7,000 renminbi a month, and then with the housing provided. And the rest, I set up a fund to train the CSRC staff. And when I left this CSRC, I set up 2 scholarships for Chinese students. So I felt the country, the government had given trust in me, had given me a lot of opportunity, and that's my way of paying back, so to speak. So then when I left the when I left the CSRC in 2004, I came back to Hong Kong. I decided that I don't want to work full-time anymore as an executive. So I've been sitting on various boards, and I was on the exchange board earlier, and then now, I became chairman a few months ago. So my story is one that I felt where I want to share with you is one, you have to take some risk sometimes. You have to really, with the unknown, one can never plan so well. You should, you don't have a 30-year plan or not even a 10-year plan, but at least you should know what you want to do in the next couple of years. I think that is something that's very fundamental. And how you do and what you do is very important as you prepare the next step. So the lessons are, one, you really have to dedicate yourself to your job. You have to like what you do. If you like it, then you will put your heart to it, and then you will shine in that, what you do. That's number one. Number two is sometimes you have to take some risk. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. For me, the big turning point is really when I left the comfort of being, almost becoming a partner in the law firm, go into a new organization with people that I don't know and, that was mid-career. It's one thing to start something new when you're younger, but when you're mid-career or even when you're more seniors will be more difficult. So you have to take some risk. And that came again when I was offered the opportunity to go work in Beijing. That was also a risk. I didn't know, what it was like working for the central government, all the restrictions that might come along, and whether I was able to do what I need to do. So those are risks, and you have to embrace it. And then once you embrace it, you have to put your heart to it. So very simple. You can't really plan that well, but if you really work hard and have a focus, then one thing at a time, and that's just the story of my career. So I will stop here, and I hope that you get some lessons from what my path has been. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cha, for the inspiring sharing and valuable advice. We actually have a Q&A session now for Mrs. Cha. So now open the floor for the Q&A session. Yeah, please. Thank you. Any questions from the floor? If not, I actually got a question for Mrs. Cha. So, Mrs. Cha, given your extensive exposure in mainland China, can you advise what are the few attributes that mainland financial institutions are looking for, especially from Hong Kong young graduates?
A lot of Chinese institutions, companies, whether it's financial or otherwise, are quite keen to hire Hong Kong professionals because we are known, number one, for our professionalism, for our work ethics, for our dedications, 敬業 in Chinese. Because, if you talk to a lot of the employers, they will find that Hong Kong professionals take their job seriously. That's our training. To me, there's no other way. Of course you would take it seriously, right? It's not like, this job is not so important, therefore you can do it lightly. So Hong Kong professionals are known for that. And I think we should be proud of what we are known for. So for what it is like, I think Chinese financial institutions particularly like to hire Hong Kong professionals, particularly in legal work, in many cases, in compliance, and also in terms of the structure of the operation. They know that Hong Kong people can do a good job putting things together.
Thank you, Mrs. Cha. Any questions from the floor? Don't be shy. Right, if not, I got the second question.
Okay.
So, what will be the next golden opportunity in Hong Kong's financial market? I think a lot of students here actually.
The second, the golden opportunity. It's hard to say. I think at every different stage, if we look back at Hong Kong's development in financial services in the last 20 years, if we can say we started out with the listing of H-shares, of H-share companies, state-owned enterprise. At that time, everybody had some, I would say, a lot of reservation. Well, this is a trial. We'll see, 7 companies the first batch, 8 the next, 10 the third, a handful. And look where we are today. H-share and Chinese companies and other red chips and so on, and now about 67% of our total market capitalization on the exchange. So it is, opportunity comes along when there are new Chinese enterprises. They needed a lot of professionals. I remember in the early days, the accountants and lawyers would do their due diligence in the far corner of mainland. So those were one wave. And then now, with technology, with fintech, I think it brings another dimension to financial services. There's some people say, well, maybe fintech will displace a lot of our professionals. Yes and no. Maybe a lot of the manual type of work will be replaced by, AI, machine learning, so on. But on the other hand, on the advisory side, where the human touch is required, that is still, I would say, an even bigger demand there. The golden opportunity, one never know whether it's golden until it's past. When you're going through it, you just know that there are opportunity. And looking back, you say, oh, those were the good old days. Then you say, those were the golden days. When you're going through it, you may not I can't say whether it's golden or not.
Right. Thank you. It's very inspiring. Due to time limitation, we'll actually pass it to the next speaker. Thank you once again, Mrs. Cha.